chapter one of the Sublime Object of Ideology. We're doing portions 7 through 9, and we're starting out with the ideological fantasy. Zizek continues the theme of describing an ideology using some type of double layer where there's an illusion of knowledge kind of at a top layer, and then there's how you behave on the bottom layer. And that's what he's calling a social reality. So, and it's a little bit different than, or it's expounding on what Marx says that a symptom is, or that a commodity fetish is. So how people actually behave determines the ideology and the commodity fetishism. So there's an inversion. And he also describes it as a double illusion. So social reality itself is guided by the illusion. That's the first illusion. And then overlooking that fact is the second illusion. So it's a little bit trickier than what it sounds like at first. Let's see here. There's a concept within Hegelian philosophy called speculative inversion. Actually, it is within Marx philosophy. But you have a universal and a particular, and the concept that causes the inversion, or the concept of inversion, is when you have the concrete. You have these examples of the concrete, which are what they are, how things are appear to you, and that's called phenomenology, or the phenomenal. How your appearance, how things in the world appear to you, and each individual particular thing, that's a concrete object. Well, as humans, we see those individual concrete objects, and we abstract from them and make this we see a pattern, and we make this common idea. We call it a universal. Well, when we get confused, so goes how Marx looks at it with this inversion. You will say that the universal is, in a sense, more real than the concrete side. So an example that Zizek uses, that he's grabbing from Marx, is you can have you can experience Roman law, and you can experience German law, but at some point you might think that there's some type of thing called the law, and the law is somehow prior to the German law and the Roman law, and those are just instances of the law. Whereas, and that's what a speculative inversion would be. But the argument is that the particulars are first, and universals are based off of the particular. This same confusion is supposed to happen within or with commodities and money. So that inversion ends up happening to where you have the concrete content of a commodity. So that would be the use value, right? So however, how useful a hammer is its value. And then you would have money itself, as a commodity. And money itself is a representation, and we talked about this in the last talk, but it's a representation of the social relations. Well, when the inversion happens, it it seems as if there is a value of money that's not based on social relations, but it's an abstraction. And we say the same way that we would say that there's a such thing as the law versus Roman law and German law. The same thing as we say that money has this uh, this intrinsic value, and it's a natural property of money versus the paper's actual use value, which we don't do. So when we get confused in that way, that's when the commodity fetish happens, and you know, based off of the inversion. Um, Go ahead. I thought you were going to say something. So I guess another something else within this portion of the book is there's a classical concept of ideology where the illusion is located in knowledge, and people no longer believe in ideological truth. And that's supposedly where we are at right now. Um, the problem with thinking that there's some type of ideological um, there's no longer any ideological truth is that we kind of get blindsided by ideology. So we take a cynical position and we think that we don't have any illusions, but we still do. So he's going to, and that's what the ideological fantasy is. So he's going to talk that a little bit more about that later. So any questions there?
No. The bottom part on this, are you about to go into that related to that, the illusion that the knowledge of the ideology means that you're no longer blinded?
I believe he's going to talk a little bit more about that, but I have some more notes here. I think it's
that
good.
Double portion.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. I guess another way to put it with the double illusion, this unconscious portion right here, it's really the unconscious fantasy. So whenever there's a fetishistic inversion, there's a double illusion. Whenever there's a double illusion, there's an unconscious fantasy. And that's the cynical distance between you and the knowledge. So there's a level of the double, or I'm sorry, there's a level of the unconscious fantasy, and then there's actually overlooking that you have an unconscious fantasy, if that makes any sense. That's what the cynical position is. You get a double illusion. All right. Let's see here. The next portion. We've got the description of how Lacan looks at the passage between feudalism and capitalism. And Lacan, also being a student of Hegel, he's kind of preoccupied with the master-servant relationship. And he believes, and at least Zizek believes that Lacan believes that the master-servant relationship, where it was highly visible within the feudalism age or era, it becomes hidden in the capitalism era. So you still have this master servant relationship, but you don't realize it. So it's part of the ideology. Um, the theme about, so with social reality, there's things that can, there's behaviors within psychoanalysis, or what psychoanalysis claims, that there's ways of believing in things, um, or having beliefs that are, you can maybe say, shared beliefs, or um, they're external to you. So one example is canned laughter. So what Zizek says is, you can, one of the reasons why you can watch a show and not laugh while you're watching a show, but there's canned laughter. And you might just have it running in the background, or you can be actively watching, but feel relief when watching it, is because the laughter, the canned laughter, is laughing for you. So you can still have, because of the way your unconscious works and everything, you can still have relief from you not laughing, but witnessing uh, someone else laughing, or like this is the comedy show laughing, or what have you. I think, kind of as a side note, kind of interesting. Uh, that would kind of mean that shows that are comedies that don't have canned laughter, it seems like they would have to really be that much more, I guess, funny, or they're just that much more difficult to create, because you know, for one, what the common conception would be, people don't. What I always thought was just, canned laughter was to tell you when to laugh, because maybe you're just too slow to pick up on the jokes. But in addition to that, it well, the certain what comedy performs for you is to give you some type of relief, and it won't do that for you if you don't have the canned laughter. So there's like two things missing with a comedy that doesn't have the can. So I guess they're that much more skilled in those shows.
If you find relief in the shows with that canned laughter, then they have to be much more skilled. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. Let's see here. I think the weepers at the funerals, I personally have no experience with weepers at funerals, but people being paid to weep, I guess. I think I, I've seen that in movies before, but that's it. Um, but as far as people being sad for you and having a relief, I think it was in The Godfather. They had weepers at the paid weepers at the funerals. So I think that's really, and those are examples of beliefs, or yeah, beliefs that are outside of yourself. So, do you have any questions about this one?
No.
Yeah, I'm gonna redo all these mind maps so that they have a new structure where it kind of says a premise and a conclusion based off of a lot of the stuff. So, okay, we have law as law. I'm gonna, in a book that follows this book, it's called "For They Know Not What They Do," and a subtitle "Political Enjoyment" by Zizek. He talks about that the sublime object of ideology is kind of incomplete, and he thinks you can't understand it without reading both of those books. And in For They Know Not What They Do, there is a portion Well, I would say maybe 80% of the book is about Hegel and his view of what Hegel's saying. So he's going kind of straight to Hegel, not through Lincoln to Hegel. Um, so there's a whole lot of where it kind of uh, influences how he looks at how our thoughts are created. A lot of description of negation and a lot of description of Hegelian dialectics or Hegelian judgment. So I might bring that up here in a second when we talk about just the title of this Law is Law is a tautology that is one of, I don't know, 12 different kinds of Hegelian judgments, categories that Zizek talks about. So that the title here is already going to be a little bit confusing. So let's go into this a little bit. So I think transference, I mean, we can talk a little bit about that. Within psychoanalysis, you have the analysand and the analyst. The analyst is like the therapist. The analysand is the one getting the therapy. One of the positions that the analyst tries to get into is they try to get into the position of where the analysand is transferring really the analyst transfers into the position of the big other for the other for the analysand. So if you, and Freud talked about this, Lacan has his own way of describing it with using terms like the other. What you want to do is you want to have, and this is kind of tricky because there's different pathologies and things where they don't always try to get into transference. But if you're an obsessional person or a hysterical person, or I believe even someone who suffers within perversion, so neuroses or perversion, I believe they're trying to get you into this position or analysis. An analyst tries to go into the state of transference with you. And so, for example, an obsessive and someone with neuroses and obsessional neuroses, when the analyst successfully gets into the state of transference, the obsessional subject will do things like project onto the analyst their strategy for dealing with their father, for instance. So if the father was the original prohibitor, the lawmaker, when the subject, was an infant or as they were developing, all those laws and the strategy for dealing with those laws, that strategy is how the subject will treat any situation where there's an other that tries to prohibit them from doing things. So long story short, what the analyst tries to do is to get the analysand to first get into the relationship of transference with the analyst, and then second, realize that these laws, these prohibitions, were kind of forced on them, and they're not active decisions of the analysand. And once they start realizing it, that's traversing the fantasy. That's when someone is like, that's the talking cure. That's realizing, hey, why do I care about shutting the refrigerator door in that I'm, and why am I so meticulous about it where I got to go back and check it 50 times? Oh, that's not really my rule. This was a rule that the parent gave me, I don't really need to care about that. So that's transference. When we're reading through this portion of the chapter, when they use a term like transference, it's one of the difficult things about reading Zizek or Lacan or anything. I mean, they just expect you to just know all this stuff. So let's see here. When he talks a bit about Pascal, and then how belief works with Pascal. Pascal, many people, when they think of Pascal, I mean, as computer programmers, and me and Taylor, we think of the language, the programming language, Pascal, and his contributions there. But he also has, he's a bit of a philosopher as well, and he was a Christian, and he had a certain idea of how people should approach theism. The common way to view Pascal is to think of it as, with his idea of Pascal's wager, which is, hey, essentially, what do you got to lose? You might as well just be a theist, because there's nothing to lose, but there's a great upside. So it's kind of some type of probability argument. But if you read, go ahead.
I'm listening. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you read within this chapter, you read Pascal, the excerpts that Zizek has. It's actually a more sophisticated argument, or even a discussion. So people were coming to Pascal and saying, "Hey, I don't have enough reason to believe, but I want to." That's kind of strange in of itself, but I want to. And Pascal says, behave first, then the belief will come second. And so Pascal starts to be that way of coming to theism would be something that would, as far as like maybe having a bunch of rituals that you would follow. Maybe you could think of like any type of rituals, with the Catholic rituals, or what you need to study and how you need to behave, and doing them even though you don't believe. That's the way to actually, because your unconscious mind starts to behave in a certain way because you are acting out. Again, this theme of the social realities, how you behave is really what you believe. And then the belief comes from that. So that argument, Zizek also finds that in Kierkegaard, where Kierkegaard is kind of notorious. I mean, he's the father of existentialism. He's notorious for saying you don't need existence precedes essence. So you don't need a reason to believe. So you've got a Kierkegaard with existentialism, like a Christian existentialism. You've got Pascal with his form of how you come about belief. And then you've got Lacan, where Lacan describes the unconscious, like a dead, senseless letter. The unconscious functions like a language. So there's a certain structuring that you could do to where you can, hack yourself to become a theist. So there you go. Let's see.
Hack yourself to become a theist. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Definitely Pascal's. That's Pascal's. The Kierkegaard one. Existentialism. Most people think of existentialism. They think of Jean-Paul Sartre and the atheistic version of existentialism. What they don't know is that Soren Kierkegaard was the first existentialist, and he really a lot of the way that Christians um, approached God. It's so influential that if you were to look at Kierkegaard and then you were to look at philosophers or theologians before Kierkegaard, you would see a lot of what Kierkegaard says um, resonates with how people talk today about Christianity. Like, I mean, close your eyes to, and pray about a thing. Does it seem real to you? Oh, okay. Well, then that's the best that you can do, kind of thing. You know, um, he's it's really, the whole idea of belief first. It's so ingrained into Christianity now. You kind of think of it as that's really how it was always. But if you look at theologians previous, I mean, if you read Saint Augustine, you're not gonna recognize how Christians speak now and be able to reconcile that with Augustine, because he's going to be more of a. I mean, he was a student of Plato. I mean, he's a philosopher, and he was all about trying to reconcile Christianity with logic and all this stuff like that. Kierkegaard was like, absolutely not. And then that's what you have now. Theists, Western theists tend to say faith is the opposite of belief. And that's Kierkegaard. You can trace that to him. But in case that's all useful for how we're describing this idea of how you behave and existence before essence, all these types of things, within this portion of the book. I think that's probably as much as where I want to go with some of this. So, do you have any other questions?
I guess tying that back to the ideological fantasy, and we were talking about the illusion, so where are you seeing the tie-in from on this portion?
So the ideological fantasy is like this double illusion, or how you behave, right? So speculative, inversion, all these have the same theme. Same theme. It's trivial. Like, okay, what you actually do, that's really what you believe. It seems trivial. It seems like you spent a lot of time describing something that seems just super trivial. But there's another level in it, that's the cynical part. The fact that you know that this way of behaving is not really how the world is. And then you do it anyways, and then someone comes in and tries to point it out. Hey, you're doing this paradoxical, silly thing. And then your position as a cynic is to say, you're an obscene person. You're pointing out the obvious. Nobody actually believes. We just do it. That is another level. It forestalls you from being able to see the ideology that you're a part of. So he's saying that's within this theistic position. That's within commodity fetishism. That's within whenever you have a legal system and all these things. So it's a way to structure. The ideology is a way for humans to structure the social reality and make it bearable and all this stuff.
Cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. I think that might be good enough for the review for this one. Go ahead and stop this.